In 1984, members of the Rajneeshi movement contaminated salad bars with salmonella, sickening more than 750 people in what is recognized as the first bioterror attack in the United States. In Florida, Miracle Village became a single neighborhood where hundreds of registered sex offenders live under tight residency restrictions. Across the country, certain small towns become defined by a single force that reshapes daily life. Some are structured around legal supervision and exclusion, others around unresolved violence witnessed by dozens, and others around public crises that moved from rumor into documented harm. In these places, the surface can look calm: quiet streets, ordinary buildings, familiar routines, while the defining pressures sit underneath, embedded in history, law, and memory. The pattern is a set of communities where unusual social arrangements, institutional failures, and long-term disasters became inseparable from the town itself, whether through concentrated supervision, collective silence after violence, environmental collapse, or the way myth forms around real trauma. In South Florida, near Pahokee and surrounded by sugarcane fields, Miracle Village stands apart from typical residential communities. Originally constructed in the 1960s to house sugarfield workers, the settlement later took on a very different role. Today, it is known for housing a concentrated population of registered sex offenders within a single, closely monitored area. The community developed in response to housing restrictions that made it difficult for registered offenders to find legal residence elsewhere. As a result, hundreds of individuals subject to registration requirements live within the same neighborhood. Rents are comparatively low, which has made the location one of the few viable options available to people who face exclusion from many other towns and cities. Walking through Miracle Village, the setting itself appears quiet and orderly. The defining characteristic is not visible in the architecture or landscape, but in the legal status of many residents. The concentration of individuals with serious criminal records creates a distinctive social environment shaped by monitoring requirements and public awareness. For some observers, the calm atmosphere can feel at odds with the histories associated with the population. The village represents an unusual arrangement within Florida's broader approach to residency restrictions and supervision. From Florida, attention turns to the Midwest and the town of Skidmore, Missouri, whose history is closely tied to a single, unresolved event. For years, residents lived under the influence of Ken McElroy, a local man accused of multiple criminal acts, including assault, arson, and attempted murder. Despite repeated charges, legal consequences were limited, and frustration within the community grew over time. In 1981, McElroy was shot and killed on the town's main street in broad daylight. The incident occurred in front of more than 40 witnesses. No one came forward to identify a shooter, and the case remains unsolved. The absence of cooperation with investigators became as significant as the killing itself. Skidmore's reputation was shaped not only by the violence, but by the collective silence that followed, which left the crime unresolved and the circumstances officially unexplained. Moving west to Oregon, the town of Antelope became central to a highly unusual chapter in American history during the early 1980s. The Rajneeshis, followers of Indian guru Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, established a large commune known as Rajneeshpuram near the town. The movement promoted spiritual teachings centered on meditation and communal living, and its members sought political influence in the surrounding area. Tensions escalated when efforts to gain control of local government positions encountered resistance. In 1984, members of the group carried out what is recognized as the first bioterror attack in the United States. They contaminated salad bars in nearby communities with salmonella, causing illness in more than 750 people. The episode drew national attention and led to criminal investigations and prosecutions. For Antelope and the surrounding region, the events left a lasting imprint. what began as the establishment of a religious commune evolved into a conflict involving public health, local governance, and federal law enforcement. The town's name remains associated with a period when ideological ambitions crossed into criminal action, reshaping both its history and its public image. From the Midwest, attention turns to New England and the town of Salem, Massachusetts, whose history is defined by a judicial failure that has echoed for centuries. Salem is widely associated with the witch trials of 1692, an episode in which fear and suspicion were formalized through legal proceedings. More than 200 people, most of them women, were accused of practicing witchcraft during that year. The accusations were driven by a mixture of superstition, personal disputes, and communal anxiety. 19 individuals were executed by hanging. Others died while imprisoned, either from harsh conditions or as a result of the treatment they endured. The trials became a lasting example of how legal systems can be distorted by collective panic. Today, Salem has incorporated that history into its identity, drawing visitors interested in its past. At the same time, the memory of the trials remains a point of reflection on injustice and the consequences of abandoning due process. The events of 1692 continue to shape how the town is understood both locally and nationally. From colonial Massachusetts, the focus returns to California, where Slab City presents a very different model of community life. Located in the Sonoran Desert on the remnants of a former military base, Slab City consists largely of concrete slabs left behind after the base was dismantled. It is often described as the last free place in America, reflecting its informal status and limited governmental oversight. The settlement operates without conventional municipal services. There are no local police departments, formal tax structures, or city government in the traditional sense. Residents build their own shelters, secure water through independent means, and establish informal norms within the community. The population includes individuals drawn by artistic expression, self-sufficiency, or a desire to live outside conventional systems. Slab City combines elements of an art enclave and a survivalist outpost. Conditions are shaped by extreme heat, limited infrastructure, and the necessity of self-reliance. For some, the absence of formal regulation represents autonomy. For others, it illustrates the challenges that arise when public institutions are largely absent. The settlement remains an example of an alternative lifestyle that exists on the margins of standard civic structure. From the California desert, attention shifts to Colorado City, Arizona, a remote community long associated with the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS. This group is a breakaway sect from mainstream Mormonism and for years exercised significant influence over daily life in the town. Under the leadership of Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence, Colorado City became closely tied to the policies and practices of the FLDS. Investigations and court proceedings revealed patterns of forced marriages involving underage girls, as well as the separation of families and the expulsion of individuals who did not conform to church leadership. These actions took place within a community that outwardly appeared orderly, with rows of similar homes and quiet streets. The contrast between surface appearance and internal control became a defining feature of the town's reputation. In recent years, Colorado City has undergone changes as outside oversight increased and legal actions reshaped local governance. Nevertheless, its history remains linked to a period in which religious authority exerted extensive control over personal lives, leaving a legacy that continues to influence how the town is perceived. From communities shaped by social and institutional failures, attention turns again to Pennsylvania, where Centralia has been defined for decades by an underground coal fire. The fire began in 1962 and has continued to burn beneath the town ever since. What started as a localized blaze spread through abandoned mine tunnels, gradually undermining the surface above. Over time, smoke and toxic gases began to emerge through cracks in the asphalt. Sections of land became unstable, and the fire's heat altered both soil and vegetation. Trees in affected areas died while still standing, and parts of the ground became prone to sudden collapse. As the fire expanded, most residents relocated, and the town was largely abandoned. Today, only remnants remain, including sections of roadway once known as Graffiti Highway. The visible damage on the surface reflects the ongoing activity below, as the fire continues to burn decades after it began. Centralia's story is not tied to a single catastrophic moment, but to a long-term environmental disaster that has reshaped the town's landscape and emptied much of its population. From the subsurface fire in Pennsylvania, the focus shifts to southern Illinois, where Cairo sits at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. Its location once made it a strategic river port city, supported by commerce and marked by substantial architecture that reflected economic ambition. For a period, Cairo appeared positioned to benefit from river trade and regional growth. By the mid-20th century, however, the city experienced sustained decline. Racial violence, civil unrest, and rising crime affected both public safety and economic stability. As tensions escalated, residents and businesses left. The resulting population loss accelerated disinvestment, and entire neighborhoods were vacated over time. Cairo was not abandoned through official designation, but the cumulative effects of conflict and economic contraction reshaped the city. Many structures remain, yet large portions of the built environment stand unused. The city's current condition reflects decades of division and reduced investment, leaving a once prominent river town struggling in the shadow of its earlier aspirations. From Illinois, attention returns to Oklahoma and the town of Picher, whose decline was driven by environmental contamination linked to mining. For years, zinc and lead extraction supported the local economy. The operations left behind large quantities of waste material, which accumulated in piles across the landscape. Over time, that waste contaminated soil, air, and water sources. Elevated levels of lead were detected in children living in the area, and ground instability increased as abandoned mines deteriorated beneath the surface. In response to mounting health and safety concerns, federal authorities designated Picher a Superfund site. Residents were gradually relocated as the area was deemed unsafe for long-term habitation. What remains is a largely empty town marked by industrial debris and environmental damage. Picher's decline did not result from a natural disaster, but from the long-term consequences of resource extraction without adequate safeguards. The town now stands as a case study in how industrial activity, once central to economic growth, can produce lasting environmental and social costs when its impacts are not fully contained. From towns shaped by economic and environmental collapse, attention returns to the Appalachian region of West Virginia, where Thurmond lies within the New River Gorge. Once a functioning railroad hub, the town's growth depended heavily on train traffic and coal transport. When rail activity declined and eventually ceased, the economic foundation that supported local businesses and residents disappeared with it. Thurmond's remote location further limited alternatives. Access into the narrow gorge has always been constrained by geography, and as rail operations faded, few other industries replaced them. The population dwindled, leaving behind structures that remain largely intact but unused. Streets stand empty, and many buildings have not been significantly altered since the early 20th century. The quiet is not the result of a sudden disaster, but of gradual disconnection from broader economic networks. Today, Thurmond is often described as preserved in time, its condition reflecting the era when trains last defined its daily rhythm. The absence of routine activity is striking. Without traffic or commercial presence, the surrounding forest and the sound of the nearby river dominate the environment. The town illustrates how isolation and shifting transportation patterns can leave a once active place suspended in an earlier chapter of its history. From Appalachia, the focus shifts north to Whittier, Alaska, a small community with approximately 200 residents. Nearly all of them live in a single structure known as Baggage Towers, a 14-story building that contains residential units along with essential services. Within the same building are a post office, a grocery store, a laundromat, and even a police station, allowing residents to meet most daily needs indoors. Whittier's geographic isolation shapes its design. The town is connected to the outside world by a narrow tunnel that operates on a controlled schedule and closes at night. When the tunnel shuts, vehicle access in and out of town stops until it reopens. During winter months, severe weather further limits movement and reinforces the reliance on shared indoor space. The concentration of services within one building reflects practical adaptation to extreme conditions. Residents live in close proximity year-round, and daily life is structured around the constraints imposed by climate and access. Whittier is not abandoned, nor is it economically inactive, but its configuration highlights how geography can dictate an unusually enclosed form of community living. From Alaska's isolation, attention returns to West Virginia and the town of Point Pleasant, which is closely associated with a local legend known as the Mothman. Reports from the 1960s described a winged figure with red eyes seen by several residents. The sightings occurred in the years leading up to the 1967 collapse of the Silver Bridge, a disaster that resulted in the deaths of dozens of people. Because some accounts of the Mothman preceded the bridge collapse, the legend became intertwined with the tragedy. For many, the creature was interpreted as a warning sign, while others viewed the reports as products of fear or rumor during a period of heightened anxiety. The event itself, the bridge collapse, was a documented structural failure, but the legend surrounding it became part of the town's identity. Point Pleasant has since incorporated the story into its cultural landscape, drawing visitors interested in both folklore and history. The town's association with the Mothman illustrates how myth can develop alongside real trauma, creating a narrative that blends documented events with enduring local belief. From West Virginia's folklore, attention shifts to Villisca, Iowa, where a single unresolved crime continues to define the town's historical identity. In 1912, 8 people, including 6 children, were murdered in their home with an axe while they slept. Despite investigations and public scrutiny at the time, no one was convicted, and the case was never conclusively solved. The house where the killings occurred still stands and has been preserved much as it was in the early 20th century. Over time, it has become associated with claims of paranormal activity and is frequently described as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Visitors report unexplained sounds, sudden temperature changes, and other experiences they interpret as unusual. These accounts are part of the site's reputation, though they remain anecdotal. The 1912 murders left a lasting mark not only on the families involved, but also on the town's collective memory. More than a century later, the absence of a definitive resolution continues to shape how Villisca is remembered, with the preserved house serving as both a historical site and a focal point for ongoing interest. From a single crime scene, the focus moves to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a site defined by large-scale loss during the Civil War. In 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg resulted in more than 50,000 casualties over the course of several days. The scale of the fighting and the number of dead made it one of the most significant and devastating battles in American history. In the years since, Gettysburg has become a preserved battlefield and a major historical destination. Alongside its documented history, the site has also developed a reputation for reported paranormal experiences. Some visitors and residents describe seeing figures in period uniforms, detecting the scent of gunpowder, or hearing unexplained sounds in areas where fighting once occurred. These accounts coexist with the well-documented military history of the location. The battlefield remains a place of remembrance and education, with monuments and cemeteries marking where soldiers fought and died. The association with ghostly sightings reflects how deeply the events of 1863 continue to influence the cultural perception of the area. From Pennsylvania, the journey returns to Illinois and the town of Alton, which has built much of its modern identity around claims of haunting. Alton describes itself as the most haunted small town in America, a label that reflects both its historical record and its embrace of paranormal tourism. The town's past includes periods of war, disease, and violence, including the presence of a Civil War-era prison. Many historic buildings in Alton, such as former hospitals and hotels, are linked to local ghost stories. Unlike in some communities where such accounts remain informal, in Alton they are openly acknowledged and incorporated into tours and events. Paranormal investigations and themed attractions have become part of the town's public image. Alton's reputation illustrates how a community can integrate difficult aspects of its past into its present identity. Rather than distancing itself from stories of unrest and tragedy, the town has chosen to frame them as a defining feature, blending documented history with long-standing local lore. These towns show how a place can be shaped less by growth than by the story that overtakes it. Whether it's Miracle Village formed by residency restrictions, Skidmore marked by an unsolved killing witnessed by more than 40 people, or Antelope linked to an attack that sickened more than 750, the identity becomes permanent and public. In Centralia, Cairo, Picher, and Thurmond, the damage is physical and structural, lingering long after the turning point. If you want a natural extension, a follow-up video focused on Centralia and Picher would track how environmental disasters can empty a town in slow motion.